Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is the sixth and final Rulemaking Advisory Committee for Division 85 rules focused on permitting and mitigation in Oregon's wetlands and waters. Our meeting today is going to go until about 12 p.m. I'm Samantha Mason. I'm a facilitator with Kearns and West, and I'll be working alongside Department of State Land staff to facilitate this meeting today. And I'm joined by my colleague, Maria, who will be supporting the meeting and taking notes. Just a reminder, hopefully you heard that notification, but the meeting is going to be recorded today and will be shared on the DSL webpage. So today's meeting is really focused on final wrap-up pieces for the RAC process. And we'll be looking to RAC members to engage in this meeting. So please ask your questions and provide feedback. And as a reminder, we ask the primary RAC member participate today. So if you are an alternate and your RAC member is also on the line, please route your comments and questions through your primary representative. We also have a number of DSL staff today, both presenting, but then others listening in. And a reminder for those DSL staff listening in today, if you do have questions about the content of the meeting, please reach out to Gray and Mel outside of the meeting space so that we can reserve the time to hear from RAC members. And then for our non-RAC members and interested parties, we'll have time for your comments later in the agenda, and we ask that you remain on listening mode. So as usual, before we dive in, we'll just do a quick round of introductions. And I want to start first with our DSL team. So if you can share your name and the role on the project. Then we'll go to RAC members to share your name and affiliation, and then our agency advisors. So let's first get started with Danielle, and then we'll go to Gray.
Good morning, everybody. Danielle Boudreau. I'm the rulemaking coordinator at the Department of State Lands. Which the main thing that I do is help this process move along, and I project manage it and tell everybody when to get their stuff done.
Great. So over to Gray, and then Mel will be on deck.
Yeah, can confirm, Danielle, and she does a good job of it. Okay, so hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Gray Wolf. I'm one of two of our statewide mitigation specialists, along with Mel, who's going to introduce herself next. I'm just a co-lead for this particular rulemaking. Mel?
Hi, thanks. Mel Rudenko, also mitigation specialist and co-lead for this rulemaking, just like Gray. I can kick it over to Daniel.
Hi, everyone. Daniel Evans, wetland ecology specialist with Department of State Lands. I was specifically working on issues of jurisdiction with highest measured tide and some of the ways that that's been modified or proposed for changes in rule. So I'll be answering questions really regarding that and a few other things like aquatic resources of special concern questions. And Charles.
Hi, Charles Redon. I'm the removal fill specialist, and my role today will be mostly answering questions related to the permit application process.
All right, great. Well, thank you all, DSL staff. So next, let's go to our RAC members. If you can share your name and affiliation, that would be great. And I'll start with Becky, and then Brad will be on deck.
Hi, I'm Becky Craig from the Wetlands Conservancy, and I'm sorry I don't have RAC member on my thing. I did it last time and I couldn't remember how to do it again.
Oh, no worries. We can help you out with that. For folks, if you want to adjust your name yourself, you can go to the three dots by your name in the participants tab or at the top right corner of your video and click the menu and scroll down to rename. Brad, over to you, and then Brian is on deck.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brad Livingston. I'm the statewide wetlands program lead for the Oregon Department of Transportation.
Great. Brian?
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Brian Cook with Clean Water Services in Washington County. I'm the Capital Permitting Program Manager.
Great. Next, let's have Jonas, and Julia will be on deck.
Hello, I'm Jonas Moyal. I'm a ecologist and wetland banker.
Great. Julia, and then Marnie will be on deck.
As many of you know.
Oh, Julia, I think you cut out there.
Apologies.
Julia, I think we can hear you now. Do you want to try
Okay.
again?
Julia Bond, City of Portland, Bureau of Environmental Services, alternate for Caitlin Lovell.
Great, thank you. Next, let's go to Marnie, and Michael will be on deck.
Good morning. I'm Marnie Keller. I'm the Environmental Services Program Manager for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians in Roseburg.
Great, Michael, and then Sue will be on deck.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Michael Martin, League of Oregon Cities.
Sue Brady, I'm a biologist with Anderson Perry and Associates.
Great, great. Did I miss anyone from the RAC? No? Okay, great. So next, let's go to our agency advisor. So we have Shelley on the line. Shelley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. I am Shelley Tatum with Oregon DEQ, and I'm with the 401 program.
Great. And I just realized I missed Jessica. Do you want to introduce yourself from DSL?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Salgado. I'm a wetland ecologist, kind of just rules writing support on this project. So helping Daniel answer questions about jurisdiction.
Great, thank you. And welcome, everyone. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our agenda review for today's meeting. So before this meeting, we sent out the agenda and materials in advance. So hopefully you all had a chance to take a look at those. At the last meeting, we discussed the rules related to compensatory mitigation and concluded all the new proposed rule changes. And today, we'll begin by looking at your comments on the Division 85 rules and how DSL has responded to or considered your input. Then we'll take a look at the fiscal impact statement. We'll have a break around 10:35, and then also talk through the racial equity statement and review the need for the rules. We'll have, as always, our interested party comments time, as well as to talk about next steps after the rulemaking advisory committee concludes, and we'll wrap up around noon. So next slide, thank you. So hopefully you all are feeling very comfortable with Zoom. Just a few quick reminders. We ask that you raise your hand when you're ready to jump into the conversation. You can do that by going to the bottom left-hand part of your screen or menu and clicking on raise your hand, or it might be in your reacts column or in your reacts kind of button. So click on reacts and then find your raise your hand. If you're on camera, you can also physically raise your hand, and I'll be keeping an eye out for raised hands on video. I don't see anyone joined by phone, but if you do need to join by phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand and *6 to come off mute. Also, if we ask that you remain on mute for the duration when you're not speaking, so we can make sure we hear directly from RAC members trying to get into the conversation. And you can unmute yourself by going to the bottom left-hand part of your screen and clicking on that microphone with that cross through it to come off mute and to remute yourself. We also want to encourage folks as much as possible to have your cameras on, because it makes us feel like we're more in that face-to-face dialogue for these meetings. And so if your bandwidth allows, it's really helpful if you can turn your video on, and we appreciate all of you who have your videos on for the meeting. Another thing to note we have closed captions available for the meeting today, so you can enable those by clicking in the menu of your Zoom menu. We ask that you, if you're using the chat, to please use for questions and comments germane to the discussion. And you all do a great job with this, but just a reminder to be respectful to each other and the DSL representatives as part of this conversation. And then if you have any technical difficulties, please reach out to Danielle to help you with any technical issues. Great. So with that, I think we're ready to turn over the conversation to DSL staff to take a look at the comment tracker. So I'm going to invite Mel, Gray, Charles, Daniel, and Jess to review the comments that the RAC member you all have made throughout our 5 previous meetings together. And so the DSL staff are going to talk through how your recommendations and feedback were addressed, or if not, why not. And we'll be going chronologically in order of when the comments were made in the meeting. So you'll see the number, the meeting number when it was stated. And DSL will be sharing your comment and then the follow-up responses to those comments. DSL has tried to focus the comments mostly for when you all have raised things that needed additional review, internal discussion, and consideration. So that's where the group will focus, or the DSL staff will focus today. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to raise your hand to get into the discussion. And we have a lot of material to go through. And so we wanted to encourage you all for today's meeting in particular to try to not pile on, but if you agree with the statement that's been previously shared, just note your agreement with that person or comment, and we will make a note in the record. So encourage you to say, I agree with so-and-so about XYZ, just to keep us kind of moving and make sure we cover all the comments and responses, and are able to hear from you all as we go through the comments today. So DSL wants to make sure they've circled back to your questions, comments, and concerns and provide their rationale for their kind of final recommendations. Though if during the discussion you still do not agree where the rule language is at, we'll be making notes in our meeting documentation for this meeting, but also want to make sure you're aware of an upcoming public comment period if you'd like to provide some additional comments and suggestions coming up this fall. Any questions on process before we dive in? No? Okay, so with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to DSL. And this first one, I believe, is for Daniel.
Thank you, Samantha. All right, so this the first question or response that we have here is from RAC meeting 2, and this the context of the question was the definition for highest measured tide was expanded to allow another reporting option, which was using the E-beam model, which is stands for elevation-based estuary extent model. And so part of the question was asking about hierarchy for what's the best way to find highest measured tide in the field. And so what we wanted to clarify here is that a hierarchy is not being specified within the rule. We want to allow for a range of mapping approaches, as well as all the diversity of scenarios that can happen site to site and project to project. Firm data taken from a gauge, I mean, that's excellent. It's always preferable. And if it's determined it's available, it's something DSL staff may be asking for, but we didn't want to add to the rule a codifying a hierarchy in order just to maintain all the flexibility in the scenarios that consultants out in the field may find themselves in. And then for the second part is about a question about the use of the word extent in the rule language. We determined that we wanted to keep that in there as one, it's extent is defining what we're doing. It's mapping the boundaries of an estuary. And also two is that it refers to the direct model name E-beam, which includes extent within the name itself. And so because other state agencies, quite particularly DLCD, are also using this, it's aligning us with that model and keeping the wording to describe what we do. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Any clarifying questions or comments from RAC members? No? Okay. So next one will go to Jess.
All right. So my question that I was assigned is, can you clarify how related adjacent lands is defined in the rules section? It feels a bit vague. Related adjacent lands is defined, it was added as a definition in Division 85 to match Division 100. And that language in Division 100 was based on the definitions in statute for ORS 390, their OPRD statutes about scenic waterways. But we pulled out that definition in Division 85 because it's explicitly included in the definition of state scenic waterways. So we needed to define what related adjacent lands means. And again, it's based on statute. And then the next, I can wait if there's any comments.
Yeah, any comments, questions on that one? No? Okay.
Okay.
On to the next.
This other one is kind of also a related question. Just more of a comment of would like to see DEQ's outstanding resource waters and other agency designations included, not just OPRD. We noted this comment. Again, the intent of that rule change was just to match statute in Division 100. We weren't trying to add to our jurisdiction there. But we will consider to use inclusive language for all relevant agency designations. When I looked into DEQ's outstanding resource waters, it only included 3 waters, which is Waldo Lake, Crater Lake, and the North Fork Smith River. 2 of those resources, Waldo Lake and the North Fork Smith River, are already subject to DEQ's 0 cubic yard threshold for permitting because they are either state scenic or essential submoded habitat. So yeah, we're only kind of missing one of those resources in the current definitions.
Thanks, Jess. Any questions or comments? Okay, great. So next, let's go to Daniel.
All right, this is the first of a few interrelated questions. And so I'll be responding to all of them. So you may hear some repeated portions. So just wanted to let you folks know about that. So tidal river definition is unclear. And that was the comment. And this is in relation to the where our proposed rule changes incorporated tidal rivers is already in like the tidal waters definition. So we just included tidal rivers to clarify, be consistent where tidal waters are being talked about. And so we actually don't have a definition of tidal river proposed or existent in rule. And so what I wanted to explain more about is that besides that, the use of tidal rivers was just to bring it together with the tidal waters definition. The remainder of the questions were really just asking about how to clarify what tidal waters are, tidal rivers, because there's some that are in this, there are tidal activities in the freshwater portion of the river as well as in the saline portion of the river. And what I wanted to really explain for the folks is that our tidal waters definition is straight from statute. And so when we're describing our jurisdictional limits, we're limited in what statute gives us to work off of, which affects our definitions. And so that appeared to be some of the source of just trying to understand it better. And so I'm going to highlight the pathway to hopefully get folks there a little clearer, because we are limited by what statute provided. So tidal waters these are the sections that are jurisdictional to the highest measured tide line. And that is defined as within an estuary. In statute and thus our rule, estuary is the point from the ocean up to where the salt water is diluted by fresh water. And then specifically in the Columbia River, the western edge of Puget Island. So that by statute and rule is the estuary. That's where highest measured tide line is applied. We also want to acknowledge that freshwater river systems clearly exhibit tides all the way up to Bonneville Dam, all the way up to Willamette Falls. But this is outside of the scope of this definition that's set for us in statute. And we agree that it can be confusing. So expanding tidal rivers to incorporate the freshwater system is not consistent with how it's defined in ORS. And so we decided not to create a tidal rivers definition that was all inclusive of the places where tides occur in a river system. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Any questions or comments on this tidal river definition piece? Okay, great. Daniel, will you also be talking about cold water here?
I am. All right, so this was asking for some clarification on the aquatic resources of special concern. That's the ARSC acronym that you see there. And it was asking about cold water habitat specifically. And so what we wanted to let folks know is that currently in the removal fill guide that we have on our website, specifically Appendix B, each of the identified aquatic resources of special concern has explanation, further information for reading. And so specifically the cold water habitat is based on DEQ's OAR. They have a definition entitled core cold water habitat use. And that is where our definition or how we identify the ARSCs is made. All of this is mapped online by DEQ, and we rely on that mapping. So the question, did it include like mountain streams? The places where it is mapped and met the temperature thresholds that DEQ uses, then those are largely included. The other part I wanted to let folks know about is that the DSL is creating much more detailed abstracts for each of the aquatic resources of special concern, including the core cold water habitat. And they are currently in production. They will be released and available for the public, for consultants to use to refine their knowledge and delineation work out in the field. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we might consider changing our ARSC wording choice for cold water habitat to align exactly with DEQ's core cold water habitat. I think we have one word, we are calling it cold water habitat, missing the word core. So that might be something that we do in the future to better align it with DEQ. And that would most likely occur when we're in the finalization of the abstract developments.
Great, thanks, Daniel. Any questions or comments on this piece? Okay. Hearing none, we can move forward with habitat restoration definition, and I'll hand this mic over to Charles.
Thank you. So this comment, and actually in my response, I'll wrap in, there was a couple of other comments that were similar. There's a lot of confusion around this. In fact, in the last 2 days, I had 3 conversations internally about this very issue. So hopefully we can clarify here for the purposes of the rule and what we're trying to accomplish with this proposed change. The first is to distinguish these terms of restoration, improvement, etc., from the way they're used here in this section of the rule versus the way they're used in mitigation. And what distinguishes those right now, so that to help eliminate that confusion, is when we talk about restoration in the mitigation sense, it's under the section of rule titled compensatory mitigation. In other words, you got to do it to meet removal fill law, to get a permit, to make up for a violation, etc. The proposed change here is under the section of voluntary habitat restoration, improvement, etc. So that's the first distinction, that this won't or shouldn't get confused with mitigation, because this is voluntary, mitigation is compensatory. Now, the second part is the current issue that we have, where restoration and improvement are distinguished from each other and the requirements for the rule. So in this larger Division 85 section, we're getting at what's required in an application. So for those of you who are pouring through the rules, it's in section 550, where the application requirements are. And number 8, this is the meat of where this distinction affects what's needed in your application, says DSL can waive required information for voluntary habitat restoration. So right now, if a permit is needed under removal fill law and all the rules, and the subject of the project is for some kind of habitat improvement, we make a distinguishment between restoration and improvement, both of these being voluntary actions. If you're doing restoration, which is entirely to return it to historic state, in other words, only habitat related things, no infrastructure related things, remandering a stream, placing large wood, regrading the banks, replanting. If you're entirely doing those types of actions, then that section 550 number 8 allows us to reduce the level of detail required in the application to proceed with a permit. And that is things like the delineation does not have to be concurred. It can be what we call a field level or a BPJ delineation, an estimate. The functions and values assessment that's required for all applications, rather than being the full protocol, can be the BPJ best professional judgment version. If the project currently involves many of those activities, but also infrastructure related activities, like hardening a bank, maintaining a road crossing, even if it improves the function of that, it's maintaining those things which are not part of habitat restoration, taking it back to the historic state. Then we require the full protocol for the delineation and the full protocol for the functions and values assessment. What this rule change is doing is collapsing those two things under the voluntary make the habitat better category into one definition, so that all of them would allow us the flexibility, meaning us at DSL, when we're receiving a permit application, to say a lower level, this estimate of the amount and type of resources, this estimate of the functions and values is acceptable, versus requiring the full protocol for those types of projects. So currently they're distinguished two similar categories, but one involves infrastructure, the other doesn't. Under the proposed rule change, it'll be simplified so that voluntary projects aimed at habitat will be all under one category that allows us to waive some of those requirements. So are there any questions on that? I know it's a lot to throw out.
Not seeing any hands go up. Brian, did you want to jump in? Saw you came off mute.
I feel like I need to digest a little bit more of what was said, just a little bit more. But overall, I feel like I want to express support for that change.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
Okay, great. So next one related to stormwater and municipal ponds exemptions. Charles, is this back to you?
I think I was
Daniel.
going to take this one.
Okay, go for
Thank
it.
you. All right, so during the presentation, during the RAC meeting, when discussing the voluntary habitat work, the question arose about exemptions also being available for stormwater systems and municipal ponds. And we are not including that in the voluntary habitat restoration portion because those activities are not part of voluntary habitat restoration, installing stormwater systems in municipal ponds. However, for information, those are features that are covered in a different OAR that lists out certain types of exemptions, and I've listed the number there in the response 141-085-5157. And so it does describe where exemptions for certain types of stormwater systems and ponds are already in place. And so there's no rule change proposed for the section 534, as this pertains only to habitat restoration work.
Great, thanks, Danielle. Any questions or comments from RAC members? Michael?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I understand that. So, Daniel, are you saying that because they're not covered as exempt uses, you can't put that in? Is that effective? I'm not probably doing the best here.
Well, what
Maybe
I'm saying
rephrase
is
it.
that they are already exempt in rule, or in certain scenarios they can be exempt. So adding them to exemptions for voluntary habitat restoration was not the place to add them, because that's only dealing with things relating to like stream meandering and large wood installation, the various types of activities related to that. The section of rule that I put in there, 5157, when things like stormwater ponds, irrigation ponds, fire ponds, uh, you know, uh, certain quarry ponds, that type of thing. Those are all places where exemptions can be applied if they're in part of a delineation. So they might still get delineated, but then in the findings of the concurrence letter, providing that meets the conditions, we would just cite. But they are, there's no removal fill requirements. These are non-jurisdictional for us.
Okay. Well, thank you. That helps. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Charles, did you want to add some clarification?
Yeah, just a brief. One of the things that's confusing about that is perhaps to distinguish between jurisdictional and exemptions. So jurisdiction is, do we regulate it or not, right? And an exemption is, if we regulate it, does it need a permit or not? And so I think what Daniel's trying to wrap is both into here. A lot of these stormwater ponds, for example, and certain other types of ponds may not be jurisdictional at all. So there's no exemption needed. Some of them are jurisdictional, and there are certain exemptions that may apply, but we're not changing any of those with this proposal. I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, Charles, thank you.
Sometimes
I need to hear things a few times, so for it, good. So
I'm
much
with you.
much appreciated.
Great, thanks, Michael. Okay. So next one, are any other comments or questions on the stormwater municipal ponds piece? Okay. So next one we've got related to the highest measure tide definition. So pass back to Daniel for this one.
All right, thank you. This is, I think, question 2 of the 3, or comment 2 of 3 about the highest measured tide. And I'm going to use this question to more specifically talk a little bit about head of tide. as this question was interesting in that it brought up where, where do we use highest measured tide? Where do we use ordinary high water line? And again, the confusion about this is because tidal actions occur all the way from the ocean, from a saline system up into the freshwater portions of the river. But because of how our statute is written and thus our rule, we use the highest measured tide line only within what is defined as an estuary. And so that's the portion up from the ocean up to where the salt and freshwater mixing zone is, and that is referred to as head of tide. And then specifically within the Columbia, no further than the western edge of Puget Island. So once you come up to that head of tide line or the west edge of Puget Island, it switches over from highest measured tide as the jurisdictional line to ordinary high water line as the jurisdictional line. And so what I wanted to point out with this response, in addition, is that we do have head of tide documentation on the major coastal rivers in Oregon. And so that is available both in GIS and on the DSL website. And so that might be a great layer for people to get to understand where they're going to be mapping things at an ordinary high water level, and then when they use the highest measured tide and provide an elevation for that. So please let me know if there are any questions.
Danielle, any questions or comments? All right, not seeing any hands go up, so we can move on to the next one.
Okay, thank you. This is the last of the highest measured tide questions, and again, it's born from uh, uh, the action that tides occur in both freshwater and saltwater system, but our rule is limiting the discussion of it to the saltwater or the mixing zone from salt fresh down to the ocean. And that's confusing. It's confusing for many of us here because we commonly talk about tides up in the freshwater system too. So we're limited in our jurisdictional discussion of it by statute. And that's where estuary, the word estuary in Oregon revised statute is where this occurs. However, this comment was a little different in that it proposed looking at our freshwater definitions and incorporating tidal into that as well to clearly indicate that that tidal activity can occur in freshwater systems. We think this is a great idea, and it is outside of the scope of what we're doing with this Division 85 update. So at a future rule update, we would like to consider looking at it in Rule 3, I believe, is where our intermittent definition of other waters occurs. So that's something that we're going to be looking at in the future. Part of our challenge is to make sure that all of our other documents that we have where we talk about tides, we can't create a situation where we're starting to have multiple definitions or conflicting definitions. So that was part of the reason that we didn't address it at this time.
Thanks, Danielle. Any questions or comments on this piece? Okay, not seeing any hands go up, so we can keep moving on. And Danielle, I believe you have the next one as well.
Right, and I'm sorry, there were 4 highest measured tide comments, all relating to aspects of this, and I don't have anything additional to really say. This was the one that's more specifically mentioned the intermittent freshwater rule or definition. You can see on the left side in the text, which they were talking, so it came out like there's a lot of text there, but 5.15 subsection 3, that's where there's a really good suggestion to bring freshwater title into the definition. And again, we think that's a really great idea. It's something that we need to look at the full extent of our literature, because as part of our preparation for any rule change is before we're proposing it and convening a RAC, we're actually doing a full review of all of our documents to for consistency. And so we didn't have that time to do that for this particular aspect. So we would like to save it for a future rule change for consideration.
Thanks, Daniel. Any comments, questions on this piece? Okay. Oh, Sue, go ahead.
I just wanted to express support for this to have title encompass freshwater as well as saltwater, because there are functions in a tidal freshwater river that are unique to a tidal freshwater river, even if there's no salt influence. And then that in combination with the salt wedge issue where the top can be fresh, but the lower levels can be salt. I think that needs to be taken into consideration. So just wanted to express support for these comments.
Thanks, Sue. Any other comments, questions? Okay, so moving on to the next one. So I believe, Charles, this is back to you on the habitat restoration definition, maybe referring to a previous response.
I was just told that we weren't going, that they were supposed to be hidden.
Okay.
I don't know, Charles, if you still wanted to go over those or.
Yeah, I wasn't going to, mostly because that's what I was referring to when I read the earlier one, is I think those comments were getting at the same kinds of issues. There's a lot of, understandably, still internally and for applicants, confusion over what we mean when we throw out, for example, the term restoration. So I'll just repeat real short, and if anybody has any other questions, they can ask. First, we distinguish it from mitigation because we use the modifiers or the added words compensatory mitigation and voluntary habitat restoration as far as how it affects what's needed in your application or what kind of permit you can get. And then once we're talking about the voluntary make the habitat better stuff, we currently have a distinction between voluntary habitat restoration and voluntary habitat improvement. And that is the improvement has lots of habitat related things, but may also have some infrastructure things. That requires a higher level of detail in the application. The voluntary habitat restoration currently is only limited to those habitat related things, the remeandering, the wood placement, etc. What the rule proposed changes is to say both of those qualify to potentially use this lesser level of delineation of functions of values assessment. So that's the gist of all those. But if I missed something that somebody was trying to clarify, please let me know.
Thanks, Charles. Any additional questions on this piece? Okay, not seeing any hands raised.
I'm trying
Ryan,
to
go
raise
ahead.
my hand and I'm just stuck in the technical detail of doing that. I apologize. Just to make sure I'm clear, so that there are definitions for enhancement and there's definitions for restoration in the OARs. But and there is no definition for an improvement. You made a distinction that that activities that include a restoration type action or what is defined, and this is the clarification, what's also defined in the OARs as an enhancement type action, but those are combined with some other action is really what you're targeting. And I guess the consideration that I am concerned about is that Restoration, the definition means to reestablish the former waters of the state. And I guess I want to make sure that the ability for actions that aren't meeting that definition but are providing functional enhancement are also are facilitated versus limited. And that facilitation being that they're streamlined, they don't necessarily have to do a full wetland delineation as if it was a restoration project. So I guess I want to encourage the ability for those enhancement projects that aren't restoration by definition also are facilitated, I guess.
Yeah. So the key is when you say restoration is reestablishing a former water estate, that's specifically under the compensatory mitigation section. And so they are the same word. That's why we have this confusion, but it really is something different. That does not apply to this determination about a voluntary project to make habitat better. I'm trying to stay away from the buzzwords to avoid further confusion. So compensatory mitigation has a very specific definition of restoration, and it's what you stated. It's there used to be a wetland there. It got filled in 1932, and it's been a parking lot ever since. And now it's no longer needed. We're gonna take out that fill and make it a wetland again. That's restoration for the compensatory mitigation section. In the voluntary side, voluntary habitat restoration just means there is some habitat there. It's not gone, but we're going to make it better. Maybe parts of it are gone under a road or a whatever, but in general, we're restoring the functions of a piece of habitat. We're making it better habitat. And that's where the distinction currently comes in the proposed rule change. So we're not changing restoration or compensatory mitigation at all. It'll be that same definition. There was a wetland, for example, that was filled, and we're going to make it a wetland again. In the habitat, that's the make the habitat better section. That's where we're changing. And that is simply saying right now, we have this limited definition for that, for the voluntary stuff, that says it's only the only stuff that meets the voluntary definition and gets this lesser level of detail in the application is putting it back to historic state. It doesn't, it excludes, not explicitly, but it excludes all the basically human caused stuff, right? Roads and tide gates and dikes and levees and all that stuff. And what we're saying now is we're going to allow some of those projects because we recognize we still allow them, but we require the higher level of detail, just as if it were a commercial development, say, for the habitat improvement projects that are maybe going to remeander the stream, maybe place wood, maybe do whatever else that's habitat. But they're also saying, in order to do all these things, or to improve fish passage, for example, we need to replace this tide gate that allows this road to cross over it to access this community or this ranch or whatever. We can't get rid of the tide gate. We can't go back to the historic state when this was a free and open river because those things exist. But we still want to do all this habitat good, and we can't do it unless we're allowed to touch that. And so what it's saying is we're now going to put those projects into this category along with the return to historic state projects where we can waive some of those or reduce some of those requirements for delineations for functional assessments. In other words, the overarching rule for DSL is we're supposed to be encouraging actively habitat restoration, returning functions and values to these places. We don't have a lot of tools to do that, but one of the ways we can do it is by making it easier for the parties out there that are going to do this work to get the permits they need to do the work. And that's what this is aimed at. So I don't know if I've answered all your questions, but hopefully it's that restoration word is hard because there's two different definitions in two different sections. And we're saying we're only changing the one that's the make the habitat better stuff. We want to make that easier by putting these two categories into one that requires less in the application.
I love
the mitigation section's not changing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I love the intent, and we'll rely on engagement with the Department of State Lands at the project level to ensure that
Yeah.
applies to, to the projects that we're
Yeah.
promoting. Thanks.
And it's also a good indicator that this needs to go in our guidance. We need to rework our guidance to make this stuff more clear so that the folks that are trying to do it can understand it better. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Jonas?
I don't know if I have anything really valuable to add here, but I still do feel like it's confusing, to use the same word and have it mean different things, but just in different context based on what you're doing. It's too bad we can't do something like put waters restoration and habitat restoration, just put an extra word in front, but maybe that's a trickle through effect throughout all the rules. It's way too difficult to undertake. I still struggle to understand how improving something for habitat is called restoration when improving it should just be called enhancement. And I know that was another previous definition discussion here, but maybe there's nothing that can be done. I just want to voice that it's still confusing. It's too bad that we can't make up some more words or add more clarifying words so that people don't have to think about it just being in different sections of permitting. I mean, it seems like the solution is just to say it's in different sections of the document rather than try to fix the confusion by using maybe better words for the two different things. But
yeah, it looks like Mel has something to add, so maybe she'll give a different perspective.
I just wanted to kind of back up to big picture. We've always used the term habitat restoration in our rule, so we're not adding a term. We're tweaking the definition because the definition was too narrow. So we've used habitat restoration for decades. Restoration got pulled in as a mitigation term. It's widely used by the restoration community to mean good projects. Mitigation is the only nexus that narrowly defines the word restoration. And because, Jonas, that's the world you work in, you use it that way all the time. But people in the restoration community don't. And so when we work with them, they see restoration as all beneficial habitat projects. And that's what this term is trying to reflect, so that when those projects come in for permitting, they have the appropriate level of review and detail. So it's really about like the restoration community projects. And so many of those projects start to tag on actions that benefit, that may benefit the habitat, but not technically be voluntary habitat restoration the way we used to narrowly define it, by saying we're going to wind back the clock and make the habitat match, 1868. That's kind of what our definition used to say. So we're just switching that out. So it's still focused on permitting, still focused on the greater restoration community and not mitigation. So we're not using the word, we're not making new words up. We're just tweaking how they apply for the purpose of permitting. Hope that helps. Because these words have been in our rules. We're just changing the definition of them in a way to make permitting easier for beneficial projects. It won't affect mitigation in any way. And for permitting, all it will do is make it easier on people.
Thanks, Mel. Jonas, does that help address some of your concern around the confusion? Okay, got a thumbs up. And I see, Sue, you added, or there's a question in the chat from you on making sure you're understanding correctly compensatory mitigation restoration required for a permit. Then the documentation is held to a higher standard. If it's a voluntary restoration project not required to offset a loss, then the documentation is more flexible. So just want to confirm that understanding. Is that right, Charles? No?
Sorry, I realize I'm still muted. Yeah, yes, Sue, that's correct. Anything like restoration or anything else under the compensatory mitigation section is going to require basically the the full protocol is what a short way to say all the stuff. And if it's something, the project is being done under the voluntary section, regardless of which thing it is, it'll now be DSO will be able to waive or reduce those requirements.
Great, thanks. Thanks for that. Okay, so then any final comments, questions on these definitions here? No? Okay. Great, so with that, we can keep moving down here to this one related to accounting for credit types and mitigation banks. So this is Mel, over to you.
Yes, great. Yeah. As Sam was saying, the topic here was when we were getting into how we calculate credits for a stream mitigation project. And the question was specifically on calculating credits for a stream compensatory mitigation bank. And essentially the comment or question was asking about a site that had both perennial stream mitigation actions and then intermittent stream mitigation actions. And what they would have like separate calculations to figure out how much mitigation is there. But the question was really getting at would we handle this like wetlands, where we combine the HGM and Cowarding classes into one ledger that you can sell credits off of, or if we would keep them split into separate, like a perennial ledger of credits and an intermittent ledger of credits that you would sell off of. Is kind of how I would restate this. The question itself was asking about multiple SFAMs, and there's a couple other lines that we're not showing here that kind of get at this question of crediting and ledgers. And it doesn't require us to make additional changes to the rule. So I'll just put that out there, that there isn't like a tweak to the rule that I'm going to tell you about in response to this. But what I will tell you is that the credit tracking in the ledgers will actually be consistent with how we've approached wetlands historically, and how it's kind of described in the comment as far as like bulking the credits together and selling off of one ledger. Credit amounts essentially will not be divided out and tracked by the eligibility criteria. That's really what perennial or the HGM designation of a wetland, we're really talking about eligibility criteria for if a credit can be used. And we're not going to be tracking credits by those eligibility criteria in separate ledgers. And we will continue to work with mitigation bankers who are developing any stream mitigation bank projects, and that including ones that currently exist, if they want to work on reformatting their instruments or ledgers to accommodate this new rule. And we'll be sure to also make sure that however the credit tracking and ledgering happens in each project is consistent. So everyone's, having the rules applied to them in a consistent manner. Hopefully that addresses any concern about us kind of teasing out credits into so many criteria to use them that they might not have a wide market, I think was kind of the concern there.
Thanks, Mel. Any questions or comments related to this piece? Okay, not seeing any hands go up at this point. So let's keep moving to the next comment here related to essential salmonid habitat. And this one will turn over to Daniel.
Thank you. And we're now at RAC meeting 3. This is where this came up, and this is where a stream function assessment method was being described for the RAC. And so there were a couple of questions. This is one of two about ESH and its interplay with the stream function assessment model, or SFAM, as I'll refer to it. And so the first comment was was that if ESH mapping does not cover all the life cycle stages of the samanids on the list, then the model is incomplete. And so the response is that statutory definition of ESH is really what is driving how the agency can interact with it. And so our rule, it follows exactly from the statutory definition, which is set that the habitat, ESH is the habitat necessary to prevent the depletion of indigenous and anadromous samanid species during the life history stages of spawning and rearing. And so the stream function assessment model is written to prioritize increasing the value scores in the SFAM for all the stream reaches that meet that statutory definition. This question is getting, or a comment was about covering all life cycle stage locations. However, we're limited by statute, which identifies spawning and rearing reaches.
Thanks, Danielle. Any questions or comments? Okay, not seeing any hands go up. And so this next one is also related to ESH designation.
Yes, this was like a dynamic part of the conversation during RAC 3, so they just followed along. The first part of the response is the same. It's just reiterating the statutory definition of ESH that drives what DSL follows. The second part is to identify that locations not mapped as ESH have not, and I wish I'd written, have not yet been determined by ODFW to meet spawning or rearing designation as described in statute. And so along with that, the ESH map is updated annually. And as part of that update, ODFW biologists are bringing in all the new information that they have about from restoration projects that have opened up tide gates, et cetera, and made new reaches, where demonstrable spawning and rearing has occurred. And that DSL also at any time of the year seeks input from tribes and the public about new locations where information or data has been gathered. And I'd be very interested in working with anyone, specifically if there are particular beaches that they think there might be where we can meet the statutory definition of spawning and rearing. I just encourage anyone to reach out to me and we can discuss how to get information together so that that can be part of review for ODFW.
Great, thanks, Daniel. Any questions or comments? Okay, not seeing any related to this ESH designation.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I wanted to add one thing.
Oh, sure. Go for it.
And what this second comment described was function values being lowered when folks are doing best professional judgments, SFAMs. And what I wanted to clarify is that ESH designation only affects a value score. The function scores are based solely on the physical indicators of and are independent of an ESH presence or absence of the mapping.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Any comments or questions related to ESH? Okay, not seeing any hands raised on that. I did just see we have a comment in the chat, so I wanted to make sure folks were able to see from Charles. Jonas's comment on using a different word for the voluntary improvement is heard, and I'd prefer to consider changes here. Unfortunately, statute specifically allows DSL to waive the application requirements for fees only for a voluntary habitat restoration project. If we change the terms in rule, we lose our underlying authority to waive the fees and other requirements. And then citing a specific part of the rule, the department may waive the fees specified in subsection 2 of this section for a permit that will be used to perform a voluntary habitat restoration project. Any comments, questions about this clarification for Charles? Okay, not seeing any hands go up or folks come off mute for that one. So with that, we can go ahead and keep moving to this next piece related to defining hardening, and I'll pass it over to Mel.
Thank you. Comments 40 and 41 in here that we see on the screen, I'm kind of going to respond to both of them together since they're related. And the topic for these again was when we started talking about the part in rule that we added that said, you know, when a project's adding hardening or acting to harden the bed or banks, excuse me, of a stream, that we'd require mitigation, and all of you engaged with us on a lot of dialogue with that. And one of the things that came out of that dialogue was a definition for hardening, because the concern was that stream enhancement projects that were stabilizing but not actually intending for this like permanent hardening to happen would go it would be considered hardening if we didn't further define what we meant by that. And so we received a proposed definition, which you see on your screen. So verbatim, it reads: hardening means the removal or fill actions within waters of the state that do not result in stream function enhancement and are designed to restrict stream channel migration, either lateral or vertical, in perpetuity in the action location. And then the additional line regarding or the line below was also looking at this definition and was suggesting that we consider vertical, lateral migration, you know, just depending on the different geomorphic like context of a site. Both excellent comments. DSL's action in response to these comments is we are going to be adopting a definition for hardening. Our process will be to start with the definition provided to us by Clean Water Services. Thank you very much for all the hard work on that. We will start with that definition and we will test it out. What we kind of have to do is like go through our rule and make sure that there's like no ramifications somewhere else, you know, the usual review process. So we'll be doing that in the next month before it goes out for public comment. And we will circle back with Brian and Clean Water Services on what we do end up incorporating in rule. It may be the same exact definition, but as I said, we do need to, you know, put through a review process and make sure that sometimes when we tweak one spot in rule, there's a ramification somewhere else. So that's pretty much what we're looking for, because otherwise we were happy with the definition as presented. But we will be doing that follow-up, and you will see in the rule that goes out for public comment in October that we will have that definition of hardening. Any questions on that?
Yeah, thumbs up here. Brian.
Thanks,
and Becky. Great. Okay, so not seeing any folks raise their hand or come off mute, so I think we can go ahead and keep moving. So this next one is for you as well, Mel.
Thanks.
Yeah, go for it.
This is also on that same topic of hardening. So same conversation that we were having with you all when this comment came up, and it was asking us if we were intending for that statement about mitigation being required for hardening a stream to apply only to new material because we all know there's a lot of material already in streams that have changed them. And that is our intention, that this would be a mitigation requirement for new material going in. And we did make this change to the rule. So if you were to look at our draft rule today, we do have that simple change made, that it's specifying new material. And that will be the language that goes out to public comment. So again, thank you for this comment. It helped us improve the rule to reflect what our intent was when we wrote it.
Thanks, Mel. Any questions or comments related to the specification of new material? Okay, not seeing anyone raise their hands. So I think we can keep moving. So the next one is for Gray of adding in where appropriate to this part of the rule.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So this is going to cover this section is covering actually the next two comments that we received, and they're both kind of thematically the same, similar. And this is over section 680, which is the section of rule that pertains to the principal objectives and general requirements of compensatory mitigation. And really, the current proposal from DSL is to add one principal objective to the list, which is increase wetland resources through restoration and creation. And the general theme of the comments that we got in this were, you want to make sure that you put where appropriate here, because, you know, not all areas of the state, not all areas where there haven't been wetlands in the past, et cetera, you know, if it's an urban system or something, not all areas are appropriate to do particularly creation, but also restoration, any kind of mitigation project. So we hear that comment, and basically the response here is just that DSL is definitely going to consider adding where appropriate into the proposed rule update. We have, you know, we're going to consider this just as a formality. We likely will add it, but we need to do another round of internal, just, you know, kicking the tires on any potential ripple effects that adding where appropriate might have. We can't see any readily, but we've got to discuss one more time internally. And so that covers those two comments there.
Thanks, Gray. Any questions or comments related to this piece? Let's see, thumbs up from Brad. Right. Okay, not seeing any hands go up at this point. So we can keep moving to this next one related to enhancement and wetland loss. So Gray, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So this one is, I think RAC meeting number 5 was kind of the RAC meeting that had a lot of themes of comments. And so the next update and response that I'll provide is for the next 3 comments that we received, because they're all thematically the same, they're similar. And if just to remind folks that we were discussing at this time section 694, which is the section of rule that outlines special requirements for the use of enhancement and preservation as compensatory mitigation. Particularly, we were talking about the special requirements utilizing enhancement as compensatory mitigation. And what DSL has proposed to do in our current rulemaking is add a G under this section that says that enhancement shall not reduce Oregon's resource base of wetlands in locations with disproportionate wetland loss. And the theme of the comments that we got around this particular proposed addition is, you know, how are you going to determine, how is DSL going to determine an area within which to define whether disproportionate wetland loss is occurring? And so the comment that we understand that comment, we take it in, and it is very legitimate. And so our response to that is that if we change the rule in the way that we're proposing, we will create guidance on how these locations are identified. And we're also going to explore adding a section of to our ARM annual report that discusses wetland losses as well. So basically our response is, hear that, and we need to figure out some guidance around which locations, how big, is it a HUC 8? What is it? And how are we going to determine historic wetland loss or disproportionate loss?
Thanks, Gray.
And so again, that goes for the next 3 comments.
Great, thanks for that. Any questions or comments related to this piece around historic wetland loss or disproportionate wetland loss. Okay, not seeing any hands go up or folks come off mute. So I think we can keep moving here to the next comment related to self-sustaining. So Gray, back to you.
Yeah, self-sustaining. We had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the next 5 comments relate to self-sustaining, and they are all pretty similar, but just different bents on it. And I'll say these are one of the particular rounds of comments that I really appreciated, because it really showed we had the right folks in the room on the RAC that knew what they were doing and had experienced how to deliver permittee responsible or compensatory mitigation on the landscape. So they understood that maybe we were being a little short-sighted by adding one particular section that we were proposing. So just to remind folks, we were discussing at this time section 710, which is the section of rule that outlines monitoring requirements for compensatory mitigation projects. And the proposed addition that DSL was hoping to do is adding on to part 5 of that section at the end, the monitoring requirement of ensuring that a compensatory mitigation site is basically is self-sustaining, and allowing DSL the ability to ask for more monitoring or updated compensatory mitigation plan if we determine that a site is not self-sustaining. The theme of the comments that we got around that were, well, how do you determine self-sustaining? There's not a cohesive definition for that. There's, lots of different definitions, and, what would you look at to determine whether something is self-sustaining? Or even on the flip side of that, some of the comments that we got were, well, sometimes we don't want a self-sustaining system. We want a system that's dynamic, right? And a dynamic equilibrium of some sort. So the response that DSL has to all of these comments is that we hear that, and what we're proposing is to remove that addition to rule. So we are going to propose to remove, or if the mitigation site is not self-sustaining, because it really doesn't have a good definition.
Great, thanks, Gray. Any questions or comments related to the self-sustaining piece? Okay, not seeing any hands go up or folks come off mute. So I believe we can keep scrolling down here, because these were all in the same theme of the self-sustaining definition and comments there. So coming down to the mitigation bank definition, reasonably expected was the comment to request to remove that piece. So
Yeah.
Gray, back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just to remind folks, this particular section of rule that we were discussing was the definition of mitigation bank. And what DSL was proposing at the time is to update that definition by updating basically to the correct statutory reference, as well as adding, and this is the particular part that we got comments around, adding a sentence onto the end that describes how a bank is utilized within the removal fill program. And the particular section of that addition that, that the comment was directed to was the part that says a mitigation bank is used to compensate for reasonably expected adverse impacts of project development on waters of this state. So the comment was just to remove reasonably expected. It just seems like it's a waste of a few words. And the response from DSL after we talked about that is we really generally agree with that. There's not, there's nothing about reasonably expected that has any kind of statutory holding. It's pretty loosey-goosey terminology. So we're going to consider with this rulemaking removing reasonably expected from that definition.
Great, thanks, Gray. Any comments or questions related to removing that phrase? Okay, not seeing any hands up, so we'll move on to the next one.
Okay, so this last comment came in when we were discussing section 720, which is the section of rule that discusses the mitigation banking purpose and policies. And particularly what DSL was proposing to add here is onto subsection 4C, increasing wetland resources through restoration and creation in areas where cumulative loss of wetlands has occurred. So again, ensuring that mitigation banks do this, right? This is a new add. So on top of the fact that we, require that mitigation banks maintain regional functions and matching for demands for credits, we are also adding increased wetland resources through restoration and creation. And the general theme, as it was above for other comments, is just to, that we need to make sure that we're putting some limitations around creation and restoration and making sure that those additions to the resource base only happen where appropriate. So the response that we have to that comment here is that DSL will consider adding where appropriate to the end of that subsection C in the updated rule text.
Great, thanks for that, Gray. Any questions or comments? Okay, not seeing any hands go up, so we'll go to the last one. Gray, back to you.
Let's see. I think that's all that I had there. So I don't have, oh wait, we have one more. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm cooking with gas now, sorry. One more. So this was regarding section 730, which sets forth how mitigation credits are established. And so the proposed update that we were proposing at the time that we were discussing was removing section 4, which said wetland credits, which was regarding wetland credits for non-wetland areas. And this said that the department may recognize wetland credits for improvement of non-wetlands, such as in-stream channel habitat, riparian floodplains, non-wetland inclusions in wetland upland mosaics, and other ecosystem components that provide ecological benefits to a larger wetland bank. And so the comment was really, if you remove this section, does that mean that you can't approve buffer credits, upland buffer credits, for example, at a mitigation bank? And we took that comment to heart, and we know that that may have, so if we remove that section, that may have ripple effects on our allowance to our discretion to award upland credits for upland parts of a site. And so what we're proposing, the response here, is that we will keep the proposed rule in. So we're going to actually not remove section 4. And that way we're not going to have any of those unintended consequences with removal.
Great, thanks, Gray. Any questions or comments related to this upland buffer credit? Okay, not hearing anyone jump in here or raise hands. So I think with that, we can go ahead and conclude all of the comments that DSL has prepared responses for. I did just want to also kind of return back to the full RAC group and note, DSL strive to be really thorough and comprehensive, working through all of the comments that they heard where they said they'd go and do some more review and thinking and consideration and come back to you all. So that's what they've strived to do through this series of comments and responses. And they also want to make sure, since this is our last meeting together, that they really hear from all of you to make sure that they have responded to your comments and your questions effectively throughout this Division 85 rule-making process. So were there any parts of the Division 85 rules that you were hoping DSL would revisit or respond to that you have not heard the topic revisited today? Becky, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I was at the last meeting, I was concerned about the in lieu program, and I didn't see any response there or any questions about comments about it. I really have a concern that it being only in DSL approving itself, wondering how that's working, and in terms of the sites, the site management, whether sites are actually being developed, and how whether the funding formula that you have in here is adequate. And as I looked at the formula again today in 750 to 1C, I noticed at the end of it, it says either divide or multiply by the MM. So I think that needs to decide on one or the other.
Thanks, Becky. So I think Danielle has pulled up that part of the rule, correct?
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying is that the division symbol, if you look at the line, it's really thick, and it's just that the strike through is right there in the division sign.
Okay.
So they're proposing to remove the division and add a multiplication.
That makes sense.
Correct, Div 85 team?
No?
Yeah, and I just wanted to respond a little bit more, Becky. We've actually talked about your concerns as a mitigation team, and I'm sorry we didn't respond during the meeting today. That was an oversight, and we should have done that because we have talked about it, and we thought it would be beneficial for our team to have a meeting with folks from the Wetland Conservancy to talk about your concerns, because your concerns within lieu fee and payment in lieu are valid, and we hear them. And we also have some concerns with, temporal loss and things that you brought up previously. So we hope to do that. Probably not before the public comment period, but we'll start trying to work through and work with you guys at those meetings, because we actually would love some more solutions for limiting temporal loss of wetland functions, and finding faster ways to get mitigation funds spent on the ground. Kind of not totally, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little off topic of what our rulemaking is trying to do, but I do want you to know that we heard your concern and share it, and want to work with your group more to talk about it. And I hope that you guys are interested in that kind of conversation and finding those solutions, because that would be really helpful to have someone from the outside looking in, talking to us about those concerns.
Great, that would be good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Okay, other comments that you all were hoping DSL would revisit and haven't heard today? Okay, not seeing anyone else jump in with the hand up or come off mute. So I think with that, we can go ahead and wrap up the, reviewing the proposed rule changes. And I want to thank you all for your time and your comments, and also the DSL team for, doing this thoughtful review and providing responses to many of those comments. So thank you all for that. So at this time, we wanted to propose taking our break now, and we can revisit the next section related to the fiscal impact statement following the break. So with that, we can go ahead and pause for about 10 minutes and reconvene at 10:41. So at this point, I wanted to invite Danielle to review the fiscal impact statement for these proposed rule changes, and then we'll hold some time for questions, comments from all of you. So Danielle, over to you.
All right, thank you. Good morning again, everyone. So what we're going to be doing for however long it takes us until we get to the time that we want to have interested party comments, is reviewing components of the notice of proposed rulemaking. The notice of proposed rulemaking is required by statute, and these components are required to be in there. And especially the fiscal and economic impact statement is required to be reviewed by the RAC. So that's what we're doing. We sent you out a PDF of this. We'll go through bit by bit. And what I'm looking for is feedback. Did we miss something? You know, should we include anything more? And also, does this make sense? So right now, because of the limited size of the screen, I'm going to say, let's, if there are any comments on paragraphs 1 through 3, if anyone has those.
Any questions or comments on these first 3 paragraphs? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up at this point.
And then paragraphs 4 and 5.
Any questions or comments related to 4 or 5? Okay, not seeing anyone jump in.
Thank you. Sorry for that. So the cost of compliance is, this first question has to do with state agencies, local governments, members of the public who are going to be economically impacted by the rules. And what we're asking for here with this review is, did we leave any agencies, local governments, or groups of members of the public out of this?
Yeah, any additions folks think
I'm
need to
gonna
be made here?
I'm going to scroll down a little bit.
Can you give us a little more time to read them? I'm trying to read.
Oh,
in the middle
yeah,
of them,
sorry.
We're like kind of moving. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Okay.
Any questions or comments related to these paragraphs? Okay, not seeing any hands go up.
All right, so the effect on small businesses, this is hard to quantify, especially with removal fill permits and mitigation, because we don't know who will be applying for these and what these businesses may look like. So we have to take our best guess on how things are going to work. But a lot of y'all might be more familiar with how this is going to affect small businesses. So, feel free to let us know.
Any initial thoughts, feedback related to effects on small business? Not seeing any hands go up.
Okay, that is it for the fiscal impact statement. I am going to go into the racial equity statement. So what we sent to you was a bit of a worksheet, just kind of with guidelines for how this is developed. And we will be writing this based on y'all's feedback. So the racial equity statement, as you can see, there was a House bill in 2021 that passed that requires all state agencies to include a statement identifying how adoption of the rule will affect racial equity in the state. So we have guidelines. If you have reviewed this and have feedback, please let me know and I will type it directly in here and it will go to inform our racial equity statement, which on the second page, there's kind of a sample of how we will write that up. So as far as what persons and groups are subject to the rule, it's very broad. It's very similar to what we've had in the fiscal impact statement. These questions are designed to help us narrow down our focus. So we know that there are governmental agencies that will be affected. There are developers, conservation groups, all sorts of groups that will be affected. And then within those, are there any specific racial groups that are likely to be most concerned or affected by the issues addressed in the rules? So is there a racial group that will be positively impacted, negatively impacted, or is it that there are no impacts to any racial groups?
Do RAC members have any thoughts on responses to these questions? Sue?
So can it be just something as simple as the people and groups that will be affected by the rule are those that are proposing development requiring, mitigation or other aspects that are impacted by these rules? I mean, I don't see where it would be like one racial category over another. It's just whoever's doing the impacts.
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head. I don't like to lead with this, but for the most part, because DSL's rules apply equally to everyone who is applying for a permit, who's required to do mitigation, and then even our regulatory proprietary stuff is very similar. Is these apply to everybody no matter what? So we are okay with saying, and this is generally what we say, is there's no impact on racial equity within the state, either positive or negative. So I mean, if y'all are seeing the same thing, please let us know that, or give a thumbs up that there's no impact negatively or positively on racial equity. If you're in agreement, you just throw a thumbs up or something.
See a couple thumbs up. So, okay, a flurry of thumbs ups.
Okay. All right. And part of why, I do want everybody to look at these and kind of evaluate that. Even with DSL knowing that there's most likely no impact, we still want y'all's input on this and feel that it's important that we've talked about it. Okay. So we've kind of covered the impacts, is that there's no real impact. All right. So that's it for the racial equity statement. See, there's a couple things in chat. Okay. Thank you. And then.
Great, thanks, Danielle. Next, we've got the review for the need for the rules. So we'll pass that back to you, Danielle, to share with us the need for the proposed rule changes.
Yes, thank you. So this isn't a Word document. This is taken from things that we've prepared already. It is the major points that we're doing with these and why we need to do these. And what I'm looking for here is if in your review of the rules and what we've talked about, have we missed anything that we have talked about during these RAC meetings about why we need to do this? So our main purpose has been stream mitigation accounting and mitigation banking. And we're creating a comprehensive guidance for stream and river mitigation. We're adding a predictable and effective compensatory framework for stream and river mitigation. And we're addressing gaps in guidance for mitigation banking tools. With regards to mitigation, is there anything that y'all think we've missed and why we're doing this rulemaking? Okay. And our other updates, which we touched a lot on already this morning, so hopefully that'll be helpful in this, is that we're looking to improve estuary and wetland mapping along the coast. We're reducing barriers to voluntary habitat restoration under current permitting rules. I know there was a lot of talk about restoration earlier. And here, you know, we've called out specifically that it's voluntary habitat restoration. And then we're addressing the loss of wetland acreage from compensatory methods that do not fully replace impacted areas. That there's a little bit more detail in what we're writing out for the notice of proposed rulemaking with that last bullet. It was just a lot to try to condense down in a comprehensive bullet to fit on this slide.
Thanks, Danielle. Any comments or questions on the text up here for the need for proposed rules? Okay, not seeing any hands go up.
All right, thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Sam.
All right, great. So at this point, we usually hold time for interested party comments. I did a quick scan of our participant list, and it looks like everyone on the line is, either a DSL staff member, an agency advisor, or a RAC member. So we don't have any additional interested parties participating at this point. So I believe we can keep moving to the next steps. So Danielle, would you like to share what happens next?
Yes, thank you. And I welcome questions during this about the rulemaking process and anything related to that. So in the next week, as always, we'll send out a meeting summary, and today's meeting recording will be posted. Following this, as you could probably guess from a lot of conversation about the comment tracker, we will complete a final review of the proposed draft rules and related materials. And then we'll go to a public comment period where we'll accept both written and oral comments. And that will be open October 1st through October 31st. And that does seem a ways off. And part of this is I like to schedule an extra month in between our last RAC meeting and our public comment period so that we're allowing enough time for staff to complete that final review and make those changes, and finalize those changes that we talked about today. And then also preparing a lot of ancillary materials that we provide to the public that kind of give a broad summary or a pretty good summary of what we're doing and things like that. So it just allows us to give out, to really finalize things and make sure everything is where it should be. We'll hold at least one virtual public rule hearing. We have started moving to having 2 virtual rule hearings, one in the daytime business hours and one in the evening, in an effort to accommodate as many people as possible. And since these rules impact everyone statewide, and we don't have a, like I said earlier, a known group of people that this will impact, like permittees and folks who are required to do mitigation aren't always repeat customers. So with that said, this is why we are doing in-person rule hearings throughout the state. We want to make sure that we get as many people as possible and be good stewards of taxpayer of our money by not going and doing rule hearings throughout the state where nobody will show up. And we will send notice specifically to the RAC members when we open the public comment period, which will tell you how you can submit comments, written comments. There's 3 ways. And then also when those public rule hearings will be and how to join. And then all of our rulemaking materials will be posted to DSL's rulemaking website. I update the website within a week of these meetings. And then with the public comment period, everything will be posted the morning of October 1st. Are there any questions about what's coming up with the rulemaking process? And I guess I could say too is that these rules, some of our rules have to go to the state land board for approval. Some of our rules just go through our director. And so these rules are director approved rules. So it's a little less complicated in the approval process and when we can file. I'm anticipating sometime by the end of December, we'll file. And we haven't decided when our effective date is. We generally will file the rules. And within a month or 2, they will become effective. We want to give enough time for the public to be notified about these rules and get our website updated so that it's not, oh, we filed it December 1st. They're effective December 1st. You need to abide by these now. So we like to give folks a couple months notice of when these go into effect. All right. I've kind of rambled on about all of that. Are there any questions about what's coming up? No? All right. And I want to thank everybody before I turn it over. I want to thank everybody for your time. We know it is during the workday, and y'all have taken time out of your workday to provide us some valuable feedback. So thank you for participating.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. And I just wanted to take a moment to echo the thank you to everyone for your participation and dedication over the past 6 meetings. It's been a lot of really great information and comments that you've been able to share throughout those discussions. I also wanted to thank the DSL staff for coming prepared and staying organized and, you know, really being responsive to the RAC member comments as well. So just wanted to share some real appreciation for all of you and your hard work throughout this process. And with that, I wanted to invite, oh, well, first I see Becky, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add my appreciation for the way that the rules were presented in the beginning. I mean, it's such a, 60 pages is a lot to go through. And you did a very good job of explaining what the changes were and what they were about, why you were doing them. So I appreciate that.
Great. Thanks, Becky. Gray?
Yeah, thank you, Becky. And I just wanted to add on, I guess, just instead of all the subject matter experts, 5 months, y'all. We've been at this for 5 months, and out of the 5 months, y'all showed up every meeting and gave us just indispensable feedback. You saw our blind spots when we couldn't see it, right? And you kind of helped us anticipate some maybe ripple effects that our changes were going to have. So your subject matter expertise really went the extra mile. And, when y'all leave this, I know it, when we're in these, it kind of seems a little small of what we're doing, but just understand that what you all have contributed to is actually something quite big. So you can give yourself a big old pat on the back. We just really appreciate it.
Thanks, Gray. Mel, did you want to add anything?
I wanted to just express my gratitude to all the RAC members for all your wonderful feedback and engagement in this process. I heard from different people who watched the meetings that it was one of our best RAC teams as far as engagement and responses and just really connecting with the material we were going over. So that's pretty cool. And I also just wanted to say that your questions have actually made me a better trainer. I will be the person helping to train the staff and the public on using this. And so I definitely appreciate that you went through this process with me and gave me that feedback and that experience. So thank you all so much. I hope I see you again very soon because it's been a pleasure to work with all of you.
Great. Thanks, Mel. Any final thoughts? Appreciation to share for the good of the order?
Thanks for the opportunity to participate and looking forward to the next one.
Ron?
Yeah, I wanted to say the same. I'm kind of a RAC frequent flyer. This is the first one I've done with DSL. No offense to the other state agencies, this is the best one that I've participated in. And it's been, really, really organized, proactive, highly communicative, open and engaging. So really, great job to the DSL team and consultant team. It's been a great experience, and I appreciate that because it could go very differently. So good job.
Thanks, Ron. Michael?
Yeah, I want to pile on to what Ron said. This is one of the better run ones, and I think particularly, it's also being a frequent flyer of RACs as well. The outreach beforehand was like really, really appreciated. I know that's something that both our executive director and legislative director, have had conversations with the governor's office about, and I really, like, at a staff level, as a fellow staffer, just for a member organization, I do appreciate DSL staff and Samantha, you as a facilitator on this RAC. Very well run. So
Thank you, Michael. Sue?
Yeah, I just wanted to add my appreciation for how smoothly it's gone. This is my first time. I am not a frequent flyer, so this is my first time being on a RAC committee, even though I'm a sub. But it's been a really interesting experience. It's great to see the interaction and the feedback given and received. So it's been a really good experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Jonas, go for it.
I was just hoping we could go back to talking about the definition of restoration. I'm just kidding. Yeah, thanks everybody for considering my points and allowing the sarcastic remarks sometimes. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Jonas. Brian?
You're just keeping us awake, Jonas. That's you're good at that. You're good at keeping us on our feet.
I just wanted to express that I like the office hour format to allow for additional digestion and conversation that can come back to the RAC team. So I appreciated that.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. As you know, as someone who's worked on a couple of DSL racks, that's a new thing that we've done. And so it's good to hear that feedback so that way we know that it's something we should continue in the future.
All right. Well, and even in your kind of final comments, you're still leaving us with really helpful thoughts for how to move forward and, continue to support RAC meetings in the future. So again, thank you all so much for your time and dedication. And with that, we will go ahead and adjourn.